Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3HR Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for a quick update on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today in the Workplace Minute, it's a good opportunity at about the midpoint of 2026 to step back from the daily headlines and ask a simple question. What has actually mattered the most so far this year in the world of work? Every week brings another announcement about AI, another round of layoffs, another labor market report, another economic forecast, or another tech breakthrough. And it's easy to become overwhelmed by the volume of information and lose sight of the larger trends that are shaping the future of work. And that's one of the reasons why we created the Workplace Minute in the first place. Throughout this year, we've tried to not simply report the news, but also to try to identify the signals behind the headlines. And as we enter the second half of 2026, I thought it'd be worthwhile to revisit some of the biggest themes we've covered so far this year on this show and consider what they tell us about where work is heading next. The first and perhaps most important story of the year has been the transition from AI experimentation to AI implementation. Last year, many organizations were asking whether and how they should adopt artificial intelligence tools. And this year, that question has largely disappeared. Instead, leaders are asking how quickly they can deploy AI, where they should invest, and how they can demonstrate measurable business value. And we've explored this transformation in several Workplace Minute episodes, including discussions about the rising AI infrastructure investments, the enormous demand for new data centers, and the billions of dollars being committed by companies across nearly every industry. And we've also examined how organizations are beginning to fund those investments, sometimes by reducing spending in other areas, including compensation budgets, benefits, and workforce growth. That shift represents something important. AI is no longer just a future initiative. It's become part of the operating strategy for many organizations. During the second half of the year, I expect we'll hear much less about AI's potential and much more about AI's results. Executives, investors, employees, and customers are all asking the same question. What value is all this investment in AI actually creating? The second major story has been one we've returned to repeatedly throughout the year, and that's the growing tension between investing in technology and investing in people. We talked about Teradata's decision to redirect compensation dollars toward their AI investments. We've discussed companies delaying raises while increasing spending on AI capabilities and specialized technical talent. We've examined comments from executives who've openly acknowledged that AI investments were taking priority over traditional workplace spending. Those weren't isolated stories. Together, they represent a broader shift in corporate priorities. The important question for the second half of the year isn't whether organizations should invest in AI. Most of them probably should. The question is whether companies can continue making those investments while also maintaining employee trust. Technology may improve productivity, but people ultimately determine whether organizations will succeed. And the companies that find the right balance between tech innovation and human investment are likely to emerge much stronger over the next few years. The third story we've followed closely has been the changing psychology of today's workforce. Throughout the year, we've talked about AI anxiety, slowing hiring, job search fatigue, unemployment benefits, financial stress, employee mental health, and the growing uncertainty among workers. We've explored research showing even employees who remain enthusiastic about technology often worry about what it means for their own careers. And we've discussed why so many organizations encourage employees to embrace AI without clearly explaining what success actually looks like or how workers will benefit from being more productive. Taken together, those stories point to something much larger. The biggest workforce challenge may not be the technology itself, it may be in confidence. Workers can adapt to change, they always have. What becomes much harder is adapting to uncertainty when the destination isn't clear. Organizations that communicate honestly, invest in learning, and create visible pathways for career growth will likely find themselves with a significant competitive advantage as this uncertainty continues. The fourth story has been one that many HR leaders have been discussing for years, but that became much more visible in 2026, and that's the growing disconnect between economic success and how many workers experience the economy. Earlier this month, we examined new economic data showing that corporate profits remain historically strong, while at the same time labor's share of economic output has fallen to historically low levels. And we explored why consumers often report feeling pessimistic, despite relatively healthy headline economic numbers. And then we discuss why many workers feel financially insecure, even while overall unemployment remains fairly low. These issues extend well beyond compensation. They shape trust, engagement, retention, and confidence in the future. During the second half of this year, I think we'll hear more organizations talking about employee financial well-being, career development, internal mobility, and long-term opportunity. Those conversations won't simply be about attracting talent. They'll increasingly become part of the overall business's strategy. The next story has been something I believe deserves even more attention, and that's the redesign of work itself. We've discussed agentic AI, digital coworkers, workforce operating systems, organizational redesign, and the emergence of entirely new ways of structuring work. Increasingly, the question isn't simply which tasks AI can perform, it's how organizations should redesign jobs, teams, leadership, workflows, and decision-making when humans and these intelligent systems increasingly work together. This is where HR has enormous opportunity. The organizations that simply just automate existing work may realize some incremental gains, but the organizations who are willing to redesign work from the ground up may fundamentally change how that value is created. I believe this will become one of the defining conversations of the next few years, and it's certainly a topic we'll continue exploring on the Workplace Minute Show. And finally, the last story we've covered extensively this year has been trust. If there's been one word connecting many of this year's episodes, it is trust. We've talked about trust during our 3-part series on AI in the labor market. We discussed it when covering layoffs, AI investments, productivity expectations, Pride Month, age inclusion, skilled trades, workplace safety, and even our Independence Day conversation about the American dream at work. Different topics certainly, but connected by a common question. Do workers believe their organizations are acting in ways that create opportunity for them, or rather are they simply demanding more and more from workers? And I continue to believe that trust will become one of the defining competitive advantages of the AI era. Organizations that can communicate clearly, explain their decisions, invest in employee development, and consistently demonstrate fairness will find it much easier to navigate these technological changes than organizations that rely solely on mandates and efficiency metrics. So what should we watch during the second half of the year? First, expect AI conversations to continue to become much more practical. The focus will shift from just product announcements to much more measurable outcomes. Companies will increasingly be expected to demonstrate return on investment, not simply adoption or enthusiasm. Second, watch how organizations invest in people. Training, reskilling, internal mobility, career development, they all will become more and more important indicators of which companies are preparing their workforces for long-term success or they're simply reacting to technological disruption. Third, pay close attention to confidence among workers. Hiring numbers, unemployment rates, and productivity statistics all matter, but they don't tell the whole story. Employee confidence, trust in leadership, willingness to embrace change, and belief in future opportunity will become equally important indicators of organizational health. And fourth, expect HR's role to continue to evolve. HR is increasingly becoming the function responsible for helping organizations navigate this intersection of technology, workforce strategy, organizational design, leadership, and culture. That's a much broader and more strategic mandate than many HR departments have traditionally held, and it represents one of the profession's greatest opportunities. As we launch into the second half of the year, one thing has become clear. The future of work isn't being shaped by artificial intelligence alone. It's being shaped by the choices leaders make about how technology and people will work together. Every organization will have access to advanced and powerful AI tools, but not every organization will create a culture where people are willing and able to use those tools to their fullest potential. And that difference matters more than ever. As always, thank you for joining me through the first half of 2026. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with me each week as we explore these important workplace issues. I hope the conversations have helped you look beyond the headlines and think more deeply about the forces shaping work, leadership, and technology. And a big thank you to WorkHuman, of course, for supporting the Workplace Minute. And be sure to subscribe to the HR Happy Hour Network on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.